Hey, God bless our young ones as they make their way. What a wonderful anthem. It is well with my soul. I had a conversation with a guy. Occasionally I need to go to Walmart. But when I go to Walmart, I try to go really early so there's nobody really there much but me and the stalkers. And I don't mean the weird dude wandering around. I mean the people filling the shelves, you know. But recently, this past week, I ended up in Walmart and encountered a fellow I knew in one of the aisles. And I said, "Hey, man, how are you doing?" And he proceeded to tell me. He thought that to be a genuine inquirer. And it was. I tried to be that as a genuine inquirer, wondering how he was. And he started telling me, and he's about the job and about the kids and this or that. And I listened for a while because that stuff matters. It's important. But there was something else I really wanted to know a little more about that he wasn't going near. And I finally asked him the good old John Wesley question. How is it with your soul? and we had to work on that one a little bit. How is it with your soul? Soul, I didn't know I had any other than the ones on the bottom of my shoes. Yes, you do. There is a part within you that was designed specifically for relationship with God. It was nearly obliterated. That's how you received yours. Nearly passed down for generations from the garden. Nearly obliterated. But it was still there. Just waiting for the breath of the Spirit of God to bring it back to life. That happens when you place your faith in Christ and His death, burial, and resurrection for new life. And then all of a sudden that soul is alive and active again with boundless potential, infinite potential, I would say in all likelihood, to develop your intimate relationship with Him. But I'll be real honest with you, there are some things that go on, some things that present themselves that are beyond our control that rock my soul occasionally. How about you? Things I don't have any control over. Things that just show up. The prayer requests week after week are many times things like that. You know? We don't ask for the diagnosis that we've gotten. We don't ask for the loved ones in our lives to struggle, to see their relationships torn. We don't ask to see the little ones that we love have difficulty, to hear stories of how they're being mistreated and bullied and whatever. There's just things out there that make it very difficult for me to always sing, "It is well with my soul." We have three very familiar scriptures this morning. Maybe you've noticed before, but maybe you haven't. By the time we're done, I'm going to trace a common thread between these three scriptures. And the first one's going to show up in Mark chapter 9. Mark chapter 9 starts out with Jesus taking his three closest pals up onto the Mount of Transfiguration, where the glory of God is revealed in an unbelievable way. And when they come back down, when they came back to the disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and some scribes arguing with them. So, chaotic scene here. And immediately, when the entire crowd saw him, they were amazed and began running up to greet him. I think that probably relieved the disciples. The emphasis shifted away from them. "Oh, Jesus is back. He'll take care of this mess." And so Jesus has a question. He asked them, "What are you discussing with them?" And one of the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son, possessed with a spirit, which makes him mute." On to the next, we'll continue to describe. "And whenever it seizes him, it slams him to the ground, and he foams at the mouth, and he grinds his teeth and stiffens out. I told your disciples to cast it out, and they could not do it." And later on in this text, we're going to find out that this has been a situation that this dad had dealt with all of this child's life. And one can just imagine what kind of efforts had been made on behalf of this child. There would have been promises or opportunities. Maybe this will help, or maybe that will help, or go see this person, or go see that person. And no doubt every time, being a father myself, hope would rise up, and maybe this would be the time where finally there would be some help for this one that I love who doesn't appear to have done anything but is in these difficult circumstances. And time after time, that hope would be dashed because it would not help. There's a proverb that says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Maybe parents understand that. Maybe hope for some change, and it doesn't materialize. You can relate to this dad, wishing things were different. But time after time, they're not. But then this dad heard about this itinerant preacher, this guy traveling around. And he was teaching things that like nobody had ever heard. It was unbelievable. And there were reports of miracles such as his son needed. As the demonic world was confronted and deliverance was happening. And so that hope would have risen again in the heart of this father. And whatever effort it took, it didn't matter. He was going to get to Jesus. And yet when he got there, Jesus' guys were there, but Jesus wasn't there. Well, he'd heard that they had the touch of Jesus in their hands too. Maybe they could help, but they could not do it. Can you feel that on the part of Dad? Hope rises and hope falls, and hope rises and falls. Maybe you've got some of that in your life now. Things that rock your soul. Things that you did not invite, things that you were not responsible for introducing, but things that just vex you deeply. And no matter what, it seems like change doesn't come. You understand how Dad feels, don't you? The nearest statement to some frustration that I can remember Jesus ever expressing happens next. "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him, and when he saw him, immediately the Spirit threw him into a convulsion, and falling to the ground, and began rolling around, foaming at the mouth. They know they're on borrowed time, see? And he asked his father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood." Basically, this boy's never known anything else but this. It's just how it's been. Long time. It's often thrown him into the fire, into the water, to destroy him. It's serious business. And then he says, "But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." How many times when somebody communicates to you some life circumstances that they're experiencing, they say, "I don't want your pity." Well, apparently you can get to a point where you don't mind the pity. You just want some relief. You just want to experience some change. If you can do anything, take pity on us. Help us. And I love Jesus' response. It's like incredulous. If you can? Do you know who you're dealing with here? If you can. All things are possible to him who believes. What kind of things have you got going on in your world? What kind of things are rocking your soul? What kind of things cause you to groan deep within as you long for things to be different? Jesus says all things are possible to him who believes. I wonder how that landed on the ears of Dad. We get a little hint next. Immediately, boy's father cried out, I do believe. Well, let me condition that. Help my unbelief. I really want some help from my boy. I really want our circumstance to be different. I want a different future moving forward. And I do believe that all things are possible, but I wonder if you might be able to fill in the gaps, because maybe my belief is not enough. You can borrow that prayer, you know. It's okay. It's really, really honest to be willing to say, yeah, I believe. But I may need you to back me up on that a little bit. There may be some, I don't know. I'm in some uncharted territory here. I know you say all things are possible to him who believes, and I believe, but I've never known anything but this with my boy. It's okay to be honest with Jesus. It's okay. Jesus commanded the Spirit, and begrudgingly it yielded, and this boy was better. And while I'd really like to say to you that whatever things you have going on that are rocking your soul, it can be undone as easily as that. But I can't make you that promise. Oh, I can make you a promise, but just not that one necessarily. And we're going to find the next very well-known verse in the book of Romans. As a matter of fact, you've probably had it quoted to you. Maybe you've had it quoted to you at a time where you really didn't appreciate it being quoted at you. Because it can very easily turn into a cliche, in a sense, where it says, we know that God causes what?
All things.
All things. We know that God causes all things to work together for good. Now, he adds some condition or some clarification on those who should expect all things to work together for good. Who's going to experience that? Well, to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Now, when he says loving God, that's not some emotional response to God. Jesus made it clear that if you love me, you'll obey me. Right? And in 1 John talks about how we don't love the world and God, because if we love the world, we don't love God. But when we find ourselves in this place of living a life of obedience, which is expressing our love for God and aware of him working out his purposes in our lives and his calling us to that, then we may rest assured that God will cause all things to work together for good. It does not say all things are good, does it? He can cause all things to work together for good. Matter of fact, he's honest enough to tell us prior to this verse that we so conveniently or often will yank out of context. There may very well be some pretty tough going as you experience this reality. So let me back up in Romans chapter 8 and make sure you understand the context out of which this phenomenal promise arises. Romans chapter 8, I'm going to start reading at verse 18. It's not going to be on the screen, just listen closely. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time, sometimes those all things that are rocking your soul, it's suffering. That's reality. That's honest. The sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Better days are coming. All things, God can cause them to work together for good, just like he says there. But sometimes there's that intervening time. Listen to how he goes and compares that. For the anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. For creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, that the creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. So these all things that rock our soul, it's a groaning that is within us and all creation, longing for things to be fixed, for things to be right the way they were designed to be. You know, when God got done with creation, he looked around and says, this is very good. And then Adam and Eve said, we're going to go this way, and think, there went very good. And groaning got introduced into the world. Suffering got introduced into the world. And we are now in the midst of our experience of all that. And there is within us this groaning, longing for things to be made right again. But we know they're not yet. And we do have opportunities where we catch a glimpse of God causing all things to work together for good. But sometimes it takes us a long time to get to that point. Yes, to have that look back. Say, I see. Seems like those things that rock our soul, we spend a lot of time groaning about them. Longing for something different. Longing for birth of that new thing to happen. Now, obviously, I've never given birth. However, I have witnessed it a few times. All I can say is you ladies are really tough. Wow. Wow. And you groan, and you labor, and you struggle to give birth to that beautiful little gift at the end, right? And I'm sure there are exceptions, and I know I'm speaking very generally at this point, but it's almost like all of that groaning and struggle and labor seems to quickly ebb away when that little one is laid on Mama's chest and they have that moment of connection. Every time we had it, I said, honey, if you don't ever want to do that again, it's okay with me. We got 4. Yeah. She just kept more babies. I said, oh my gosh, love was so hard. And such is life. We agonize and we groan under the all things that our dad in Mark 9 was experiencing, things like that. When you encounter the brokenness in the lives of people that you love all around you, you encounter that brokenness in your own body, in your own life, and you groan, longing to give birth to something new. But birth, it's not very manageable, you know. We have a coffee cup at our house. I thought about bringing it in and decided otherwise. It suggests that sometimes babies just fall out. Now, that's never been what I witnessed. I don't know if any of you had any of those. How many of you had a short labor? Anybody have short? Yeah? Amen. That's a blessing. Because sometimes they last for days, right? How many of you were more on that end of the spectrum? Like it's just going to go forever. You know? And sometimes that's how our groaning is. It just seems like there will be no end. As we groan, longing for that new birth, for that gift at the end of the process when God will cause all things to work together for good. There will be an ultimate reality of that. That's what Paul was talking about at the beginning when he said, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with what will be revealed to us." There is a gift so good coming that we will, I'm confident, just immediately, oh, well, all that wasn't bad in light of how good this is. Won't even be comparable. But that day's not yet. And so we continue. I appreciate Paul's honesty. We continue to groan our way through this life, because of all things that we encounter, just like our dad back in Mark chapter 9. Every single one of us have got examples of what that has looked like in our lives, what that does look like in our life right now. It doesn't look anything like that gift at the end. But I'm trying to point you to the scriptures that say, it's coming. We serve a God who can cause all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Now that's an important condition. You don't go run and renegade and expect that promise to be yours. You get lined up, you get following after him, and all that stuff starts coming into place. And you start being able to sing, "It is well with my soul," even though I'm in the midst of some really tough stuff. Oh, and by the way, as you groan, you do not groan alone. There will be times when words will escape you. But there is promise in this same Romans chapter 8. In the same way, the Spirit also helps our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we should, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with, anybody remember? With what? Groanings too deep to be uttered. So as your soul groans, longing for new life, longing for the realization of God causing all things to work together for good, as your spirit groans and you've just lost words, you may experience the intercession of the Holy Spirit on your behalf as he joins you in your groaning. You're not alone. Never will be. The Apostle Paul, nobody questions whether or not the Apostle Paul, who wrote the book of Romans, he also wrote the book of Philippians. Nobody questions whether or not, back me up a minute, Ken. No question about whether or not the Apostle Paul loved God or was aware of his calling according to God's purpose. We don't question that. And yet, man, did Paul suffer. As a direct result of his obedience, as a direct result of his following of Jesus, he often ran for his life, was beaten and abused and abandoned and mistreated over and over again, often went without things that we no doubt generally take for granted. Listen now, he says, I know how to get along with humble means. I know also how to live in prosperity in any and every circumstance. I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. He knew all things. He'd had it good. He'd had it tough. He'd groaned his way through a lot of life. Sometimes physically, they beat the dickens out of him because he was telling them about Jesus. He'd groaned his way through miles and miles of following Jesus. And then look what he says. You know this verse in Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. It can be translated through him who is my strength. It makes it very personal. That intimacy with Jesus. Jesus don't run short on strength, folks. When he is your strength, you got strength to spare. No matter what your all things look like. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, some of you have already shared prayer requests giving us insight into what your all things look like right now. You understand the desperation that dad felt. You understand the vanishing of hope after time, what you thought would make a difference made no difference. You can relate to that dad's desperation. But then Jesus comes along and says, all things are possible to him who believes. Because we have a God who is able to cause all things to work together for good to those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. And then with those two pieces in place, we are able to make this declaration with the Apostle Paul. If those two things are true, then I too can do all things through Christ, who is my strength. When your soul is rocked by the stuff that seems to just come wave after wave after wave. And you know, honestly, the older we get, the more people we know, and it seems like the more stuff we're more aware of. You know, there's more generations for us to be concerned about. More all things happening to people that we know, because there's more people. We're going to groan all the way home, but he will not lose track of us. Better days are coming. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. I forget the author of this song again.
Ryan Ellis.
Ryan Ellis. Everything's going to be all right. There's some powerful truth in this song. Some application for you to grab a hold of too, to listen to it. And then I'll come back and close. I know we share in common the reality that at the moment, not everything's all right. But I want you to hear the words of Jesus and receive the words of Jesus into your soul. When he says all things are possible to him who believes. And we may have to cry out, help my unbelief. That's okay. He'll meet you there and move you toward a confidence in a God who is able to cause all things to work together for good to those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. I want you to have a confidence that says, I can do all things through Christ who is my strength. To move through this life with an assurance that says, if God has allowed this in my life, He has purpose for it. It won't do away with the groaning. That's how we'll make our way home. We'll groan all the way home, but we will not groan alone. And then there will come a day when the sufferings of this present life will have faded like the birth pains of a beautiful new child. And eternity will be upon us. And yet again, our God will declare, this is very good. Trust Him. Follow Him home. Groaning as we go, follow Him home. Share some love together before you go. Maybe you have some things that you need to share with someone before you go. Maybe, as it says, you need to be held in His arms a bit. Did you notice we've moved the furniture? There's a whole lot of room for praying on your knees with somebody if you feel so inclined. It's just kind of like my house. You don't assume that the furniture gets moved once and that's its final resting place. It may be end up somewhere else eventually, but for now, look at all this room. If you want to grab the hand of a friend and say, I got some small things I need to pray about. I need to help. I need some help groaning my way through. That's all good. You can do that right where you're set or whatever you need to do. But let's love on each other and let's continue our journey together. Amen. And then we scatter to go be the church. God bless you. Have a good day.